Thanks. Okay, so the meeting has just started being recorded, and I think I will also use this opportunity to get started in full. Yeah, welcome to everybody joining. It's really good to see so many people on board already. We're up to 50 people and it's still climbing. So we're all really keen to teach more about pulsars and pulsar timing with Meerkat. So let me start going through my slides. Please do use the chat window if something's going wrong with my presentation to just give me a heads up, but it should all be all right. So we're going to start with this welcoming session. And it's here that on behalf of the other organizers, I want to welcome you to this workshop and let you know that we're really excited to share some pulsar knowledge with you, and that we hope that you'll learn quite a bit about pulsars through us over these 2 days. We know it's a pretty short program, so there's lots to do, but we hope that in a short space of time, you'll find learning all these new things also quite exciting. So I think there's about already 50 people on the Slack channel. So that's really fantastic. Thanks for joining there. And also please keep on joining there. We'll really make use of the Slack channel for our communications of this workshop. So you'll benefit by joining in there. So here is the workshop schedule. You would have already had that emailed to you as well. And I posted today's schedule on the general Slack channel. We'll keep on doing so. I'll post tomorrow's there as well. And if there's any changes in the schedule, we will let you know. But as you can see, we've just started with a welcome. And there will be one lecture after the welcome and the Meerkat introduction this morning before you have a little break. And so if you feel lost at any point, the break is a good time to sort of catch up and join in again. So I also made a little time, and I'm just struggling to get my slides to go. There we go. I made a little time zones table. This gives you the time zones of most of the major African cities that I've seen joining in for this conference. So I hope this will be helpful to you. Again, if there's any uncertainty about exactly when sessions start, please feel free to ask on the general Slack channel or refer to this table. I think the first today's schedule was also posted with various time zone times to help you go through it. So obviously it's more and less convenient for some people, but I hope you'll be able to make this schedule work for you as well. And then moving on, I would just like us, before we get properly started, to look at this workshop's code of conduct. As the organizers of this workshop, we are committed to hosting a workshop that's fully inclusive and that does not discriminate against any individual. And so we've pinned this workshop code of conduct to the Slack channel as well. And I invite you to have a look at it there. Yeah, we're really hoping to have this meeting in a positive spirit of learning. And it's also a group with a broad spectrum of exposure to pulsar work and data analysis up to now. So for some people, this will be very, very new. Other will be a lot more experienced. And so I'm really encouraging you to, in the spirit of learning, ask questions on the Slack channels and help each other out to learn more. Thanks already for the collaborative spirit that we're seeing on the VirtualBox channel. That's really, really kind and helpful. And I hope that we can, that we can as a group teach one another quite a bit across these 2 days. And of course, if any participant wants to report a violation of this policy, you are very welcome to speak to myself, Marisa, or to Daniel, or any of the other workshop organizers that you'll also meet throughout this morning and throughout these 2 days. Okay, so what are the outcomes? So really, we just hope that we can teach you some pulsar science, and we understand that to be able to do so, we need to go through some introductions to programming and statistics. And so we hope that there will be interesting introductory material to you as well as interesting pulsar science. And then of course, the main aim is for us to get to pulsar data from Meerkat and to learn how to analyze that. And on top of that, through the Slack channel as well, I hope that you'll be able to meet a student community that's also interested in astronomy in general and data analysis, and possibly in particular also pulsar work. And I hope you have fun through this learning process. Okay, so this is the group that set up the workshop. So there's about 7 of us. I've just put a picture of one person to a lecture, but sometimes they'll be co-hosted. So at the moment, it's me, Marisa, Geyer, speaking to you. I will hereafter give you a brief introduction to the Meerkat telescope. And then after me, Matthew Bales will spread the joy of pulsars. And I'm sure all the other organizers will also introduce themselves to you, but this should be a nice overview for you to come back to if you wanted to check who you've been interacting with. So beyond that, the next thing is I just want to overview the meeting format for this again. Of course, when we have quite a lot of participation, it's good to use platforms that we know will be able to support this well. So for the meetings, we're using Zoom, and we've shared the Zoom links via email and posted them on the Slack channel. And I think I've already hammered quite a bit on the Slack channel that we'll use for interaction. So we won't be able to take live questions after the lectures simply because of the numbers of people on the Zoom links. But we would want to use, there's a channel for every lecture on Slack within the Slack workspace. So for a given lecture, please ask your questions on that Slack channel. If there's many questions, we'll moderate and pick some of them. But the nice thing about using Slack is that we'll be able to have continued discussions. And so the questioning can kind of go on beyond when the lecture finished. And also, of course, it's a very nice platform for you to be able to refer back to what was said and what was answered. So we hope that you'll enjoy the platform. We've set up a channel, What's That Word, which is hoping to bridge the jargon gap for many of us. So if there's any word or symbol being used throughout the talks or throughout the exercises, please feel free to use the What's That Word channel to just say, hey, what does that mean? And we can all help one another out with understanding terminology. I've not invited everybody to that channel yet. I'll do so straight after this introduction meeting. And then for the practical exercises, you will see that many of this afternoon and also across tomorrow's schedule, there are practical exercises. And so we'll have Zoom links for them as well, so that the lecturer can start by introducing him or herself and getting set up. And then as you go through the particular exercises, the Slack will also be there as support to help you along. And then I just wanted to say, if your virtual box at this point is not fully working or fully set up, you'll be able to still follow along the morning's lectures. So through the demonstrations and the lectures, you'll be able to follow along. It's unlikely that many of us will be able to help you right now to sort that out. So let's use our breaks again to help people who's still struggling with setting up some of the virtual box functionality. But yeah, don't let that deter you. You'll learn a lot also by following along this morning. Okay, and what was next? So yeah, that was the welcome. So I hope you all feel welcomed and understand the platforms that we'll be using. Please feel free to also ask questions in the Slack channel for this lecture 1 about that afterwards. But next, I would like to introduce you to the telescope whose data you'll be using. So this is an introduction to the Meerkat telescope. And here we have it. It's a powerful 64-dish radio interferometer. As you can see from its surroundings here in the time lapse, it's in a semi-arid area. So this is the Northern Cape of South Africa. It's pinned here on the Africa map. And you can see that really for this telescope to work, we need these 64 dishes to work in unison. And of course, there's a lot of work has gone into making that feasible. And then the other thing to note is that an area like this, like a sort of a semi-arid area with not a large human population, well, that's very ideal for science like radio astronomy. perhaps you already know the difference, but unlike for optical astronomy, where we really care about light pollution, so we're trying to get rid of lights, for radio astronomy, we're trying to get away from interfering radio signals. And these are mostly caused through our telecommunications that we use as humans. So the Wi-Fi and cell phone networks and Bluetooth and satellite, these are the things that impact on our radio data. So hosting it in an area with a low human population is very advantageous. And we also have these low-lying hills that you can see in the background here that help shield us from the radiation that is still coming through from the larger cities further away. And as you work with Meerkat data, you'll also learn that, of course, satellites are overhead, and so these are not signals you can easily get rid of. They will still come into your radio data. So let's zoom in a little bit closer. This here is the aerial shot of the Meerkat telescope. There are 64 dishes. They are shown here in these as these yellow dots, and they are arranged in this spiral, as you can see going out. So each of these antennas looks like this little picture here at the bottom. It's 13.5 meters approximately in diameter. And you can see from these dots that I'm showing you in the map view that some of them are close by and some of them are quite further out. And so the closest two antennas that we have, they're only 20 meters apart, so kind of almost touching one another, just still being able to operate at that distance. And then there's the longest baseline, is what we call the distance between two antennas. That's about 8 kilometers. And so really, the way radio interferometry works is that it's this distribution, the fact that you've got a variety of distances between your various antennas, that allows you to make incredibly detailed images of the radio sky. And so Meerkat has got 2 operational science receiver bands. So these are the frequencies that we observe at using Meerkat. So in this workshop, you will mainly be using what we call L band. So all that means is the radio signal that you are collecting with the Meerkat telescope that has a frequency that runs from about 860 megahertz, that would be down here, up to, on the other side of the band, is about 1.7 gigahertz. And here, this plot is showing you the frequency response of all the antennas. And so that's why there's so many lines. There's a band pass shape here plotted for every antenna. And you can already see in this L band frequency spread that it's not completely clean of human activity. So these strong spikes that you're seeing on the lower end, the middle, and here up on the higher end, they correspond to our mobile devices. So down here is a GSM signal that's interrupting. And then we also have the GPS satellites that we use for navigation that operate at these frequencies. So we will often, and you will also see this as you work with Meerkat data, we will have to remove the contaminated parts of the band so that we can look at the clean data where we can see the astronomical signal well. So this telescope, the Meerkat telescope, was inaugurated in July 2018, so just over 3 years by now. And this is basically the postcard we sent into the world to let the world know that it's fully operational and doing incredible science. And so this is the image of the galactic center. So at the heart of the Milky Way, there is a supermassive black hole, Sagittarius A star, and that's surrounded by a lot of hot gas, and it creates this incredibly interesting environment, and also particularly difficult environment to image in the radio frequency. So this particular image you're looking at consists of about 10 Meerkat observations, and each of them would have had about a 10-hour observing track. And so, of course, there's also a lot of hard work to put this together as a single image. I'll just overlay a higher contrast image here for you. So now you can even see in more detail what the gas and filamentary type structures are that we see towards this black hole at the center of the Milky Way. And like a good postcard, this image has a lot of interesting individual details to point out. And one of the things that I like to point out is that you've got a whole spread of black holes in this single picture. So you've got Sagittarius A star in the middle here. So like I've mentioned to you, this is the black hole at the center of the Milky Way. It weighs about 4 million times the mass of the sun, a supermassive black hole, and that's where it's most luminous. However, you can also see at least two other black holes in this image. I know this isn't very bright, but in this white circle, you can sort of see a dumbbell structure, and that's the Great Annihilator. And the Great Annihilator is a system that contains the second largest black hole, and it's got a mass of about 200 solar masses. So different in scale to this 4 million times, but also another very massive black hole, about 200 times this solar mass that you can see here. And then we seem to be seeing a distant FR2 galaxy here, and that will also contain a black hole at its core. So very interesting features to point out, and of course a lot more to study just from the single image. And now moving forward, we're kind of post the sending out postcard phase and conducting high quality science. So this is just a quick overview of things I grabbed and wanted to point you to, but of course there are many more exciting works, and you can view them at the Soraya website that I've put up here, this media releases website. Let me see if I can get my cursor back. I don't seem to, but the image labeled Hayward et al., that is part of that same galactic center image that we were looking at before. And if you can see the plane is in the middle of that picture, and there's these bubbles coming out from both ends. And in fact, this was research showing that there's a giant scale burst through these radio bubbles, is showing us a history of a burst that happened at the center of the Milky Way many million years ago. So that was some of the first exciting research coming out of that galactic center image, is this fossil record of incredibly energetic bursts that had happened before. There's also this cool X-shaped galaxy on the right. So we're discovering galaxies just with very interesting morphologies. And on the left bottom corner in red, I'm showing you one of two giant radio galaxies that was discovered by Meerkat. And so these are called giant radio galaxies because they are more than 20 times larger than the Milky Way. So galaxies at a completely different scale. And there's actually not that many of them known compared to more typical radio galaxies. And so Meerkat has already done some work in discovering some of these giant radio galaxies. Okay, so what about a different domain? The domain where we are interested in understanding time. So this is why we're all here, is doing science in the time domain. And even there, Meerkat is already doing incredibly exciting work. I'm showing you here up in the left-hand corner, bursts from the repeating FRB. So I realize you might not be familiar with it, but if you're interested in learning more about strange radio bursts from which the origin is still quite unknown, there's a really nice paper where Meerkat looked at a well-known FRB that is known to emit repeating radio bursts, and found a couple of those. And then of course there is the field of millisecond pulsars, and that's exactly what we'll be looking at. So Meerkat has already discovered 8 new millisecond pulsars in a well-studied globular cluster. And it's this millisecond time frame that will set the time scale for the rest of this workshop. So obviously, if you want to be able to do science of observing things that happen at a millisecond time rate, then you need instrumentation that can sample and keep up at that rate. And so that brings us back to Meerkat. So Meerkat, that I've introduced to you as this radio telescope that does incredible imaging, well, it's not only a good interferometer, but it's also an incredible clock. And so how did we set this up to be a clock that can really time very well? Well, the way to do it is to have your own time standard be created at the telescope. So what people do is they set up atomic clocks. So I've pictured here two hydrogen masers at the bottom. So they are atomic clocks that generate a time scale for us at the telescope. And we call that that time standard Kourou telescope time. And so you've got atomic clocks that generate a time scale right there. And then what we do is we use satellite transmission to check how that time standard is different from the current best known value for UTC. And so the UTC standard will be generated through the National Metrology Institute in South Africa. And we are able to keep this local telescope time standard to within 20 nanoseconds of the South African standard for UTC. So that's kind of the first step of making sure that you have a really good time standard at your telescope, is to start by having your own atomic clocks that tag all the data that the telescope is being generated, get tagged by these time samples. But then after that, we also have a timer system. And so what that means is you have these atomic clocks generate a pulsed signal. And the idea is then that you check how this pulse travels through your set of antennas, and you time how long it takes to travel along a particular signal path. And that will give you some extra information on how there are delays within your signal chain. So you can imagine these radio antennas that need to observe and digitize the radio waves. There's a lot of complicated electronics, and there's a lot of instances where you can have signal path length delays. And so by generating a pulse and just sending it through your telescope, you can have an immediate measurement of those extra delays, so that you can also correct for those. So basically, we end up sending this pulse through the set of arrays there, through the antennas. There it goes. We hit the stopwatch as soon as it's back, having gone its full route, and then we can produce clock correction files that pulsar astronomers use to get extra timing accuracy. And once we've done this, the Meerkat clock is now to within less than 10 nanoseconds of UTC. So it's a further improvement of how accurate you were able to time samples. Okay, so why do I go into all these details? Well, it's to say that we need to set this up to be able to study the fastest rotators in the sky. So if you want to understand how a millisecond pulsar is whizzing around its own axis and creating these interesting signals, you need these sensitive clocks. And in the next talk by Matthew Bales, he will be teaching you all about these curious objects that we call pulsars. I'll just say here that they are formed through stellar collapse. So when a massive star exhausts its fuel and it dies, it collapses into this strange compact object called a neutron star. It's pictured here with the purple core center as the neutron star, and it's got this incredible magnetic field. And along the north and south poles of this magnetic field, you see the radio beamed emission. It's these flashlights that keep on crossing your screen. And every time it crosses the screen, it's like it's crossing the Meerkat telescope, and you measure the pulse signal. So you'll be learning a lot more about these curious objects. I am just going to finish by showing you that how Meerkat's back end works in action. So the telescope is already set up in such a way that it can very easily point to a known pulsar. So if there's a neutron star that's emitting these beamed flashes of light and you want to pick it up, you can just point the Meerkat telescope there, and it will do a lot of behind the scene data reduction for you to be able to see the signal come out. And this is the data format that you'll be using in this workshop. And as you go through the exercises and the lectures, you'll learn more about what needs to be done to be able to observe these signals well. So in this little screen recording, I'm in the Meerkat GUI now. This is the software we use to track what the telescope is doing. And this is all the standard information at the top. You don't have to worry too much about it. Here, my point was I wanted to scroll to see when is the telescope pointing to my pulsar. There, I can pause it now. Here at the bottom of the screen, you should see, if your eyes are good, that it's initiating a 256-second track on a target called 0437 minus 4715. So that's a very bright millisecond pulsar. I've pictured it for you here on the side. And so we're going to use the Meerkat telescope to point to that pulsar and take some data of it. So next I will jump to this diagnostic tool. Here we go. So in this screen, you can see what pulsars Meerkat is actively looking at. I've sped up this video by 8 times. And you can see basically this blue plot at the bottom that's telling me how the brightness of my signal is improving with time, the signal to noise ratio. So time is elapsing here as I'm staring at this pulsar with its beautiful, complicated pulse profile. Here I can see what it looks like at the various Meerkat frequencies. And I realize this data structure might still be very unfamiliar to you, but you'll learn a lot more during the exercises. So we've jumped to a next pulsar now. You can see it's got a different pulse shape. It's not nearly as bright as that first one we were looking at. It's starting to build up some signal here in the frequency domain. And so this is the process, how Meerkat skips from between pulsars and records the data that you will be looking at. Okay, I will leave it there so that we can finish on time. They were at a very weak pulsar now, quite a fat signal. Let me stop there and rather give you some information where you can learn more. So the Soraya website is a pretty good first stop for just any general information about the Meerkat telescope. Its address is up here, soraya.ac.za. And then in particular, we're also developing an e-learning portal. So I've put the web link for that up here as well. And under that e-learning portal, you'll find a host of introductory material to interferometry. In particular, this was hosted as part of the African Radio Interferometry Winter School. Some of you might actually have attended that as well. But there's also some pulsar work under the beamforming heading. So you can check out the lecture notes and the videos there. And lastly, the Soraya Web YouTube operates as a catch-all where we keep track of these video lectures. So we hope to also post all the recordings that are made during this workshop we're hosting now on there later. And there's basically 3 pulsar programs that are running on the Meerkat telescope. I won't go into detail here. They've got all different science outcomes. So either they are timing these pulsars to high precision, like what you'll be doing in this workshop, or they're trying to find new ones through Meertrap and Trapham. But these websites are also very informative if you want to figure out more about pulsar science with Meerkat. So it is now my great pleasure to move on to our next session. Let me stop my screen share.